For my data project, I decided to look into the recreational facilities in the LA City area using datasets compiled by state and federal authorities. This presentation will include a selection of plots from my analysis, and to view them all, please take a look at my GitHub on my Jupyter Notebook. The initial plots focus solely on the information available in the recreational facilities dataset. This first plot ranks the number of facility types in the area. The 3 colors represents the category of the facility, indoor, outdoor, and combined, and the shade represents the count. There's a clear indication that parks are the most common facility type. And this is most likely linked to parks being multi-use facilities, including, for example, dog parks, skate parks, and playgrounds within them, which would reduce the count of some of these other facility types. The bar chart was a good visualization of rankings, but I wanted to look into proportions. This tree diagram shows the proportion of each category, where around 2/3 are outdoor facilities. And this next tree diagram expands on this concept, noting the specific facility types as individual boxes. Multi-use facilities, parks, and recreation centers occupy most of this tree plot. Next, I continue to form data visualizations from this first dataset. I created a bar chart to rank each zip code by the number of recreational facilities in their area. However, this histogram was a much clearer representation of that plot. It showed that between 1 to 6 facilities per zip code is the most common. Out of curiosity, I looked into the highest ranked zip code, Los Feliz, which actually has one of the largest green areas in LA, containing a number of different parks, trails, and other facilities. Using the findings of the tree plot and the visualization of a zip code bar chart, this stack graph shows the distribution of facility types across the zip code. The main purpose of the color shades is to show proportions. For example, the tall dark maroon and dark blue bars shows that parks and recreation centers comprise most of the facilities within the zip code. I wanted to look at incorporating the 2010 census data into the analysis to determine if there were more meaningful trends that could be drawn from the data. So I decided to test overlaying a population line graph over the zip code bar chart, demonstrated here. This plot shows a slight correlation between population and zip code, where the peaks of the 2 plots align in certain locations. This led me to my first question. Are the types and number of recreational facilities within a zip code related to its demographic? My hypothesis was yes. The demographic data available for use are displayed on the screen. I created a variety of scatter plots where I either plotted the total number of recreational facilities or the number of a specific facility type against the demographic data. One example is this, number of recreational facilities against median age. Other than population, and thus the number of households, unfortunately there was no significant correlation between demographic information and the number of facilities within a zip code, which was a bit disappointing. Moving on from this, I used the built-in mapping functions to locate each park. Here's a map of the LA city within the county. This map shows a higher density of parks in the eastern side of the city, which is understandable, as the western side is more commercial, including areas like Beverly Hills and Hollywood. Some alternatives of this visualization is a choropleth map and a categorized bubble map. Both styles also reinforce the conclusion that there are more facilities on the eastern side of LA. Through looking at these maps with the zip code boundary lines clearly displayed, I found it interesting that there was quite a large range in land area. This led me to my second question. Is the number of recreational facilities within a zip code related to either its population or land area? My hypothesis again was yes. Firstly, I looked at land area to determine if there was a trend with the density of facilities in a zip code. This graph showed a lot more of a correlation compared to my previous plots, which looked promising. The increased land area leads to increased facility count, with some outliers, such as that one on the right, which is the Pacific Palisades. So it has incredibly large parks, so despite occupying a large proportion of the zip code's area, it only results in a low count. Exploring this trend further, I normalized the facility count according to the area, so facilities per squared kilometer, and displayed this on a histogram. Its skewness draws the conclusion that the large majority of zip codes have between 0 to 2 facilities per kilometer squared. This is a much better indication of facility distribution than solely just considering the number of facilities in a zip code irrespective of its area. My last plot explored a similar concept, but normalized the facility count according to population. Similarly, there's a strong correlation, strong trend displayed on this histogram, concluding that most zip codes have between 0 to 4 facilities per 10,000 people. And to answer my second question, Yes, there seems to be a lot more of a trend with population and land area, especially when normalized. So to summarize my findings, the number of recreational facilities is more correlated to the area of the zip code than any other demographic feature. Similarly, the specific types of recreational facilities are also unrelated to demographics. If the data was available, further areas of exploration would be to include land area that each facility occupies, or other census data that was unavailable, such as income, school zones, and crime rates. Thank you.
All right, do you guys want to pitch in?
Yeah, sure. I think that it was really good that you explained your topics early on, and I found it really useful that you used the colour so easily, because it meant in that first section of your presentation, I really easily could understand sort of what topics or areas they split into, even when you like narrowed down. But I found it really interesting that the insight was that there were no correlation to demographics, and really liked that you then asked different questions along the way and were really clear about what questions you were trying to ask. And then you were happy to have a result where the hypothesis came back as negative and there was no correlation. So I thought that was really good that you went through and explored a couple different avenues with that data.
Thanks, Phoebe.
So yeah, I thought that was good too. So hang on. The other thing that I thought was interesting was that you kind of zoomed in on a bunch of your questions. So you're like, well, look at this county that is very big but has very low number of parks per kilometre squared. One thing I would say is that you tended to write your conclusion, which is good if you're writing a presentation, not a presentation, like a report. But if you're giving a presentation, I prefer to see it when you say, here's the graph, and then say your conclusion so people can make their own mind up while they're looking at the graph, because you are moving very fast. And I know that's kind of a function of you sort of telling the story in a limited time. A lot of the times, by the time the graph had displayed, you'd moved on to the next slide. And so let your graphs do a bit of the explanatory work themselves. And in a real presentation where you had a little bit more time, I think you probably had about half an hour of content there, if you were talking at a like normal speed. And so there's a lot you can do with just kind of put the slide up, put the graph up, and then say nothing for a bit while people look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
I think that's just a function of like the format.
Yeah,
You got something to say, Scott?
my point was similar in that the graphs were amazing, and sorry, the graphs were amazing, and the one thing that they went by so fast that you couldn't look at them properly, and I thought that if like a lot of the points could have been made with the graph there, like many of the slides that came after, the points could be made with the slide there, but it was great, really.